Tanzanian opposition leader has big goals for his home country following the death of Tanzania's former president, John Magufuli. Tundu Lissu plans to return to Tanzania to fight for democratic progress in a country that has experienced a rapid democratic backsliding in the last 5 years. Tundu Lissu, a member of the opposition Chama cha Demokrasia na Maendeleo, the party for Democracy and Progress, popularly known as Chadema, has spent his political career, which includes a 10-year stint in parliament, fighting for more accountable polity in sub-Saharan Africa's fourth most populous country. And it nearly cost him his life. In September 2017, he was shot 16 times in what is widely seen as an assassination attempt orchestrated by the Magufuli government. But Lissu survived, and 3 years and more than 20 operations later, he returned to Tanzania from Belgium last year, where he had been seeking medical care to contest the presidential election in October. After attracting huge crowds as he toured the country to campaign, he was defeated in a contest marred by intimidation and fraud, handling Magufuli another 5 years in office and forcing Lissu back into exile. But following the president's untimely demise, Lissu is plotting his return. Tundu Lissu is our guest today on NC Exclusive. Thank you very much for joining us on NC Exclusive, Mr. Tundu Lissu. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me on your program, sir. And I'm really glad to get this opportunity to speak to the Nigerian people.
So in the first 100 days, President Samia Suluhu Hassan is steadily steering Tanzania to tackle COVID-19 after months of inaction. She has also pledged to promote freedom of expression. What is your assessment of her first 100 days in office?
I think it is fair to say that the first 100 days of the Samia Suluhu Hassan's administration have seen a dramatic change of tone. The country, Tanzania, and the Tanzanian people were not just used to being brutally treated by the security forces during the Magufuli's 5-year term, but we're also used to verbal abuse and verbal harassment of the most horrible kind. And the new president has completely changed the tone. She is kind, she's polite, she's respectful, and I think I'll be correct if I say that the country has drawn a collective sigh of relief. Even if largely during this first 100 days, she has not done what we expected her to do for given the horrendous problems that she inherited. But the change of tone has been very, very positive. And not just the tone, in my view, not just the tone. She has also made some very smart moves, in my view. She has changed direction on the question of COVID-19. She is mending fences with Tanzania's neighbors and the international community. And these are very welcome. These are very welcome changes for a country that has gone through a terrible time during the past 5 years.
I mean, you seem to have given the Samia Suluhu Hassan presidency, even though 100 days is quite short in the life of a presidency, pass mark. Now, you've been living in exile in Belgium since November 2020, when you fled your country, citing threats to your life after you returned to Tanzania in July 2020. This was after 3 years in exile, recovering from 16 bullet wounds you sustained in what you described as a politically motivated assassination attempt. Now that your old tormentor-in-chief, as you described him, the late President John Pombe Magufuli, is no longer around, will you be returning to Tanzania anytime soon?
I wish I could say yes. I'll be returning to Tanzania sometime soon, but unfortunately, I cannot say so. And the reason I cannot say that with certainty is the government of President Samia Suluhu Hassan has not responded to my extension of hand, to my request to speak to the president, to have dialogue on the question of my return to Tanzania, and not just myself, but that of fellow exiles, those of us who were forced out of the country in fear of our lives.
And why is it important for you to speak to Excellency before you return?
I called the president's office 2 days after she was sworn in, and the message that I got was the president would get back to you once she has had some time for herself. And I'm still waiting. My leadership in Dar es Salaam have also written to her, and her office responded that she would call us to a meeting. And that was almost 3 months ago, and we are still waiting. So I cannot say when I will return with exactitude, because so far we have not heard anything from the government.
Now, Mr. Lissu, you're a bona fide Tanzanian citizen. You're free to go in and out of the country. I do understand the circumstances in which you left, but it's a different guard, it's a different government at the top now. So why is it necessary for you to speak to Her Excellency President Samia Suluhu Hassan before you make the move to return to Tanzania? Are you seeking for some type of assurance that would, so you'll be safe when you return? That guarantees your safety?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Given the circumstances of my forced departure from the country, it would be unwise for me to return back home without assurances as to my security and freedom. Yes, we have a change at the top. The president is new. But the same security forces that had harassed me for 5 years are still in place. By the way, I still face 6 criminal charges in courts in Dar es Salaam. These are completely preposterous cases which were levied on me purely for political reasons, and they're still in place. And we have called on the president to show us a hand of friendship by at least giving me and my fellow exiles security assurances. And thus far, as I have said, we are still waiting. So as I say, it will not be wise to return home in the absence of those security assurances.
Now, talking about the incident that made you go on exile in the first place, the ugly incident of the assassination attempt in your life. You also had 22 surgeries post-recovery in order to get back to where you are today. Are you satisfied with the conduct of the investigations? Because I remember back then the late President Magufuli did tweet and said those perpetrators will be brought to justice. What's the latest on that?
Before I answer that question, let me just correct you a little on the subject of my treatment. I had my 25th surgery 2 weeks ago, so I'm basically still recovering from the 25th surgery. I still have one more to go in September, so that would make it number 26. Now, to the question of investigation of the assassination attempt. The truth of the matter is the attack has never been investigated. Never, not at all. The official position of the police force of Tanzania is that they do not even have a suspect. They don't suspect anybody of being involved in an assassination attempt carried out inside a heavily guarded government housing compound in the midst of a parliamentary session. They do not have any suspect in respect of an attack on a very prominent parliamentary leader. And these are the kind of excuses that have made it, if they don't have a suspect, of course, they cannot investigate. To start an investigation, you need a lead. You need to have at least somebody that you suspect. They don't have a suspect. They have never arrested any single individual. They have never interviewed anybody, not me, not my driver, not the people who were in that building and who took me to hospital. And so the assassination attempt was never investigated.
What about CCTV images? I mean, this is a heavily fortified housing gated community where the speaker, other parliamentarians and senior members of government live. How is it possible that in broad daylight, 1 p.m. if I'm not mistaken, lunch hour, they drive through, all these things happen and not a single footage?
Actually, that's a great question. There were CCTV footage that was recovered from the scene of the crime, and 5 days after the attack, the police force admitted in public that they had recovered the CCTV footage, but the police has never ever told the nation what was in that footage. And then 2 years later, the then Minister for Home Affairs told Parliament that there was actually not CCTV footage. So we have a contemporaneous statement by the police 5 days after the attack, saying that they have recovered the CCTV footage, and then 2 years later, the government minister in charge of the police force says, there was no CCTV of any kind. It's just a way of covering up this heinous crime. As you say, how can it happen in a government housing compound where ministers and members of parliament live for this attack to take place? I would like you to know that, in fact, the security was removed completely from the compound. You can never gain access to the compound because it is guarded 24/7. That day, that afternoon, there was no security anywhere. And therefore, it was just planned. It was just planned. And what happened after the attack proves that this was just a government an assassination attempt ordered by the president. There was a parliamentary investigation which was discontinued on the day that the Parliamentary Committee on Security was to give a report to Parliament about
sorry to interject there, Mr. Lissu. Yeah. You're a former president of the Tanzanian Bar Association. You're a lawyer, and you do know the implication of what the statement you just made now, saying the late president ordered the assassination. Do you have any evidence to prove this?
Let me explain myself here, and I know what I'm talking about. 2 hours before I was shot, the president was on national television and addressing the nation. And in his address, he stated that those who opposed his so-called economic war did not deserve to survive. Now, at that time, at that point in time, I was the leading opponent of his government's economic policies. And therefore, when he said that those who opposed his economic war did not deserve to survive, he was directly referring to me. And 2 hours later, these hired assassins were allowed into this government housing compound and tried to kill me. And then I say that the police recovered CCTV footage, We don't know where it ended. And then Parliament investigated the attack. And on the day the Parliamentary Committee on Security and Defense was to present its report to Parliament, it was yanked out of the program, and its chairperson and the members of the committee were dispersed. And then several months later, the clerk of the National Assembly wrote me, I have it in writing, that the government, I cannot be treated with taxpayers' money because the President Magufuli, has not authorized payment for my treatment.
But as an MP, as an MP, you are entitled to treatment by the government. The government was meant to fit your bill.
Exactly. I'm probably the only MP who has been treated the way I was treated. And I have it in writing from the clerk of the National Assembly that it is the president who prevented me from getting my statutory medical benefits. And there are all these facts, if you look at them in their totality. What other conclusion can one reasonably arrive at, if not that the government of President Magufuli and the president himself had a hand in the attempted assassination?
Now, Mr. Lissu, if you eventually get to have an audience with President Samia Suluhu Hassan, will these be some of the issues on the card that you would like to discuss with her? Because you went through a lot of personal trauma and grief, just going through all of that. Or would you let bygones be bygones? Because the man you accused of ordering the assassination is no longer alive today.
That's a great question, my brother. Let me let you know that, in fact, I have stated publicly that now that she is the president, President Samia Suluhu Hassan has the opportunity to tell the Tanzanian people what exactly happened, who was behind the attempted assassination. And here is why. Of all the government leaders during that time, Samia Suluhu Hassan is the only government leader who ever visited me in hospital. She came to see me when I was hospitalized for 4 months.
Even though
Nairobi.
She was in the ruling party? Even though she's a member of the ruling party?
Not just in the government, but also in the ruling party. And people have told me, people from within the government and the ruling party have told me that they were told by Magufuli himself that he would like to see who will go to visit me in hospital in Nairobi. So all these people who would have otherwise visited me in hospital were threatened not to dare come to Nairobi. Now, Samia Suluhu Hassan is the only one who came. Now, I have also said in public that an assassination attempt of a prominent political leader cannot just be wished away. We need truth about what happened, if for no other reason than to make sure that the truth is known so that these kinds of dastardly acts are not repeated again. And therefore, I cannot let bygone be bygone without the truth. We
and
want
also justice
to be
and
told the
posterity,
truth.
Justice and posterity.
Yes.
Too. Now let's move on
Absolutely.
to politics. They say a house divided cannot stand on itself. There were divisions within the ruling CCM party. Do you see the former president's backers, late President John Magufuli, posing a serious threat to President Suluhu Hassan by undermining authority? And as the vice chairman of the opposition party, are you willing to exploit these divisions?
First of all, I don't think there are any divisions within the ruling party to speak of. At least I've not seen any evidence of the divisions you refer to. Secondly, those who backed President Magufuli have been, in my view, have been totally discredited with the kind of revelations that are now coming out into the open, some of them at the behest of the new president, about what really happened behind the scenes during the Magufuli years. Basically, in short, senior government figures senior figures in the security forces and in the regional administration were given a carte blanche to carry out murder and mayhem. Now, these things are coming out in the open, and I think Magufuli and his legacy will be totally tarnished. Those who backed him are on the defensive. His legacy, if there ever was any, is in tatters. I don't think they pose any threat to President Samia Suluhu Hassan as such. As to what we will do, we in the opposition and my party in particular, I think all we have asked the new president to do is to remove the illegal ban on political activity that was imposed in 2016 by the then President Magufuli. We just want to do normal political party in a normal political activity in a normal democratic society. We are not demanding for anything that is not provided for by Tanzanian law. We just want that. We just want democracy.
Now, talking about the legacy of the former President John Pombe Magufuli, commentary from all over the world and political commentators within Tanzania and the East Africa region is always polarized when you look at the legacy of the former president. Some said he was a champion against corruption. They call him the bulldozer, that he was able to take on multinational corporations, especially in the mining industry, that were ripping Tanzania off and weren't paying enough royalties. Do you see any positives in his legacy, or you can never see any good in the former president?
There is absolutely nothing positive of the Magufuli's toxic legacy. And let me explain this. The so-called war on corruption was nothing short of mafia-style shakedown of the business community. Magufuli, all that Magufuli wanted was money, to get money to finance his white elephants, to finance his petty projects. And the people with money are the business community. So Magufuli went after the business community big time. Hundreds of business people were framed up with horrendous economic crimes, with money laundering, with corruption, with tax evasion, and not a single one of them has ever been proved in a court of law to have committed any of those horrendous crimes.
But the money recovered went back to the state coffers to help with infrastructure projects. And you did mention that some of these projects are white elephants. Why do you say so?
They are white elephants precisely because they are white elephants. These are the kind of projects which are very impressive on sight, but if you scratch a little, you scratch the surface a little, if you query their economic rationale, there is none. The country has been saddled with a multi-billion-dollar debt. The national debt, our foreign debt, grew fourfold during the 5 years of Magufuli compared to the 10 years of President Jakaya Kikwete. So this mafia shakedown of the business community was done in the name of corruption. I repeat, not a single case was ever proved in a court of law. All these people who were charged with these offenses were forced to pay up money to admit crimes they had not committed just in order to be released from these terrible prisons. It's mafia shakedown.
Okay.
That was not the fight against corruption.
Now, Mr. Tundu Lissu, you're still in Nairobi. You attended a book launch recently on parliamentary processes in East Africa. Now, you've been a vocal proponent for constitutional reform in Tanzania. You were a member of parliament for 10 years. How much changes were made during your time as an MP? And what are the specifics of the type of reforms you advocate for?
I will start with the first question, which I think is very good. In our entire parliamentary history, people will probably write this, historians will write of the period from 2010 to 2015, those 5 years, or perhaps I will start from 2005 to 2015. That was the period when the Tanzanian National Assembly, the Tanzania's parliament, came of age. It was a period when parliament became bold, when it made sure that government was held accountable. And I'm proud to say that in my stint, my first parliamentary stint in 2010 to 2015, I was on the forefront of the effort to make sure that Parliament played its rightful role to ensure that the government of the day was held accountable for its actions. Now, as regards to what needs to be done to bring the country back on a track, a democratic track, we need a new democratic constitution. We have been calling for democratic constitutional reforms for over 30 years. 30 years ago, a commission of inquiry headed by the then Chief Justice of Tanzania, appointed by President Mwinyi at that time, recommended that it was high time for the country to have a new constitution. 30 years later, we are still fighting for the same. So a new democratic constitution, a new free democratic electoral system, a country that treats its people with dignity, that respects rights, that respects rule of law, a nation that is at peace with itself and at peace with her neighbors and with the world. That is what we want to see.
Now, finally, Mr. Tundu Lissu, this is a question lots of people want to hear. What's the future for Tundu Lissu in Tanzanian politics? Will you be taking another shot at the presidency in the future?
I have said, I've been asked that question a number of times, and my answer has been, and it is now to your question, that the most important thing currently, the most urgent order of the day is to get the country back on a constitutional, on a democratic path. And that means getting ourselves the kind of constitution that we deserve. Once we have the new constitutional dispensation that we deserve, then the question of whether I will have another go at the presidency will be answered. I have said it publicly that me and my party will not go to the next election with the kind of constitution that we have currently and with the kind of electoral commission and the electoral system that is in place. That will be courting another disaster like last year's. So constitutional reform, a new constitution with an independent electoral commission and a fair and just playing field for all political players, then and only then can we talk of going to future elections, contesting future elections.
On that note, I would like to say a very big thank you to you, Mr. Tundu Lissu, for taking time out to talk to us, a News Central exclusive. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we wish you all the best with your recovery.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And that wraps up today's edition of NC Exclusive. Our guest was Tanzanian opposition leader, Mr. Tundu Lissu. See you next time on NC Exclusive.